Welcome to Business Talk. We're here to chat with entrepreneurs and professionals ranging across different topics. And today's talk is on communication and business in our series called What the Talk. Today, I'm joined by Caroline Ceniza-Levine, a career coach and founder of the Dream Career Club, advocating for experienced professionals that want to make a great living doing what they love. Joining Caroline today is one of our experts on communication and the power of the subconscious mind, Dr. Dalton Kehoe, an entrepreneur with his company Communicate for Life. You can learn more about our guests in the description below. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
So allow me to kick things off the discussion here on the impact of COVID and specifically the impact of COVID on career, which, Caroline, I understand is the core of your business today. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I would say that there are three things that I'm seeing a lot with my clients. So the first is that for their individual careers, it's a much more self-reflective time. I think that anytime there's a big shock to the system, and of course, COVID is a shock both mentally, physically, financially, people ask themselves, is this all there is? Should I still be doing what I'm doing? So there's a lot of just second guessing and really thinking introspectively about their career. But two, even if they're not thinking about making a move, just in their day-to-day work, they're dealing with remote work and managing and leading distributed and virtual teams and trying to build culture from afar and some of those types of challenges. So the day-to-day work, of course, has changed. And then there's this whole element of work from home versus in real life. And so, just even in my career, looking at doing things virtually instead of doing things live. And of course, that trickles down to my clients as well.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I got to ask, because you're dealing one-on-one with a lot of these execs that have a lot of autonomy already. And, how humbling has this process been for these execs? Some people tote the line of, if my management style ain't broke, let's not fix it. But maybe that's not the case these days with COVID. I'm wondering how their perspective has maybe changed on management styles today.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some people who are more self-aware than others that what worked before doesn't necessarily work now. So there are some folks who proactively will ask about, is what I'm doing still optimal, given that now my team is remote, or that some people more than others are going to be more comfortable about working either in the office or outside of the office. But then there are some folks who, they haven't asked that question of themselves, and it's kind of business as usual. And for those folks, it's just really interesting because I do, work with organizations. And so sometimes I'm seeing people, within groups and looking at the whole system. And of course, there are some staff that are struggling with the fact that their manager doesn't see that things have fundamentally changed.
In terms, Caroline, in terms of the actual communicative relationship between boss and employee, between manager and employee, are you suggesting that some managers have actually made real changes? And can you actually say what they are?
Yeah, I mean, there are some managers who are at least aware, and asking the question of, should I be doing something differently? Because they are hearing, of course, the great resignation, and they're worried about morale, and they're worried about, burnout. And so they're at least cognizant of the fact that, there might be some of these issues. Do they change things? It depends on what they've been doing before. I always tell them to check in more frequently, or if they haven't checked in a while, to really see if what's worked before is still working. There are some folks who are just much more mindful about Zoom fatigue and building in breaks and building in, some of the social things that used to just happen in real life. They know that they won't have, I'm going to bump into you at the water cooler now. So they have to schedule these things. Okay. And some are good about doing that. And, some just aren't.
If I were actually to ask you to see if you could tell me, with a manager who's being effective, can you say more specifically what they do differently now in terms of communicating with their staff than what they did beforehand? Or can you tell me the difference between a manager who wasn't effective before and you've seen some real changes in a practical, everyday communications kind of way?
Well, I mean, the examples that I can give are managers. I know several managers who have made an effort to check in more frequently, to actually ask if the cadence of their meetings needs to be different,
Okay.
that if they should be meeting more or less frequently, to actually check in individually with their team members, instead of just, like an open door policy, hey, you reach out to me. Being mindful of the fact that some people are just more comfortable than others about, kind of grabbing a manager like at their home. Even though everybody's working from home, there's still this feeling of, some people are just going to be more comfortable with interruptions than others. So I think that's probably the most practical, actionable step that I've seen where they're actually asking, is this communication still working? And should we do something different? And I think that's a great first step because everyone's going to be different and need different things.
I agree. My other question is that you must have known and continue to know some managers who are controllers, right? Who actually take the position of, I tell people what to do. If they don't do it my way, I tell them again. That kind of manager, right? And what has COVID done to interrupt that flow or change that flow?
Well, on the downside, the problem with micromanaging is that it bleeds into, the home again, because people don't have the commute to escape it. And so they're getting pinged, in the evenings and on the weekends. And I had this interaction with a manager, recently where she praised, one of her team members for being so responsive during the evenings and in the weekends. Okay. And I had pointed out to her, well, that kind of sets the tone for everybody else, that's what the expectation is. So you can't praise someone for doing that and then say as an aside, well, I'm not expecting that from everybody, because of course people are going to react to what you actively do. And so, I think that she got it, but I mean, the proof is going to be in how she manages her team day to day. And so this was an interaction this week. So I just don't know. The verdict is still out.
Do you think that highly controlling managers have had their style softened because of the distance required here to survive this pandemic?
Well, I'll preface this by saying that 95% of my clients are individuals who hire me directly, as opposed to having their organization bring me in. And so these are individuals who self-select for being, self-aware, right? And for being self-starting and motivated, intrinsically motivated to be a better leader or to improve themselves. And so, I would say that probably my client base is less controlling on average than the general population. But when I have been brought in by an organization because someone is controlling, what I will say is that once they're in a situation where they have a distributed team, which is everybody now, because people are hybrid, if not, 100% work from home, I think it does change them because it forces the trust factor because they're just not in eyesight anymore.
Right. And they can't just use direct command as a way of getting people to do things because they can't even see them.
Yeah. They can't manage by walking around. So they have to be more thoughtful about what they do, what they say, what they write.
Yeah, okay. Can you think of some? I'm just pressing the control issue here because I think that makes a great deal of difference. But can you see some other things that might have changed between managers and employees that you know in your work as a result of the COVID?
Well, most of what I see, I have to say, most of what I see is the opposite direction because, like I said, I have individuals who come to me and they are self-starting and they want to improve the situation. So I have people who've come to me because they have controlling managers, right? So they're not the ones that need to change, except that they need to let their needs be known and need to speak up and advocate for themselves. Yeah. I do think that the more distributed a virtual environment in some cases is helpful to that person because, I can encourage them to really think about, well, how do you work best? What times of day, and how would you ideally you would like to communicate with your manager? And I think it gives them, just at least a pause, because they aren't there in real life, and they can really think about, do I want to, how do I show up at this meeting, because they have to join it, and how do I show up to this meeting because they have to log into Zoom. So there's just a lot of, I think it gives them more agency than when they're just in the office and the manager can barge in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But so in a situation now where you think that you think they have more control over their work, more control over their actual individual lives relative to their managers, do you think that will last when they have to come back to the office?
I think some of it's going to last. I mean, I think this is behind the Great Resignation, right? So I think that people are really seeing what is possible. And so for companies that might have been less flexible about things like work from home or working an alternative schedule, well, now we've had this giant beta test, if you will. And so I think people are going to be just more courageous about bringing that back to the office. At least I know for my clients, they feel like they at least have a test case that they can point to. Hey, I've been doing this for a year and a half now, and it seems to be working.
Okay, and if an employee that takes that approach to their manager back in the office, do you think they'll be able to make their case and actually keep the manager at a distance in terms of exercising direct control over their lives?
Well, I've seen it, certainly with my clients. I've had several clients who have had challenging relationships with, as you put it, controlling managers who have used this gift essentially of a little bit of distance and this beta test to come back with more ammunition. And they have been able to negotiate, at least, if not fully work remote, a hybrid work model. Now, will that change if the threat of like the Delta resurgence 100% goes away? I don't know. But for now, they certainly are able to get, I think, more flexibility than they had before.
Great. I think that's the general direction I wanted to go with all of this. And I think you've answered my questions fully and effectively. Do you have anything else you'd like to add about the positive effects of this odd situation created by the COVID variant here, or the COVID plague?
Yeah, I just think, an extension to what we're talking about, which is just putting that pause there so that people can advocate for how they like to work. I think just people being more mindful about their communication and their management style, either how they like to be managed or how they will manage others. I think that's a very, very positive thing. And then from a career choice standpoint, that introspection that people are doing, it doesn't necessarily lead to resignation.
Sure.
Some people I know will look at what their jobs are and realize, I actually have it pretty good. And this isn't bad. And they're actually choosing again to, fall back in love with their job. That's only a good thing too.
Great. You mean COVID may have some indirect positive effects?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, glad to hear it.
Caroline, I'd like to ask one question in particular, in terms of what are some of the questions that these professionals should be asking themselves before they start trying to make an impact or trying to change the environment in which they're working. Everyone has a boss. Like, you may be a manager, but you have a manager as well. And so how do you first question the environment or assess your environment before taking any actionable steps to alleviate a pain or a situation, whether it's with this change of remote or even prior to COVID, if you are coming into the office holistically?
Yeah, because a lot of this is kind of the jumpstart of the platform, the thing that started this, the trigger is COVID, which of course is not just job related. It impacts family and financials and health and all of that. I mean, one of the first things that I ask is like, what is the trigger? What is the impetus for wanting to make a change, and really making sure that there isn't some other issue that is not job related, and that people aren't just trying to get all of their fulfillment or all of their needs met through their job, so that they can untangle, what's really, really bothering them. But if it is kind of the way that they're being managed, or the way they like to manage, or, a schedule, or something like that, then, I look at, okay, well, what has happened before? How do you like to work? What are the constraints that your manager and the rest of your team are under? What are the priorities for the company? Because the ideal situation is where it works for everybody, and where they can advocate for themselves, but also being mindful of the priorities of the company, and, kind of what would add value there.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, I mean, we've reached the end of our conversation, and I want to thank you both for attending this podcast. In the spirit of the work that you guys are doing, and the contributions you're trying to make to everybody during these tough times, I want to roll out the red carpet to you, Caroline, and to you, Dalton. Dalton, we'll start with you first. If you have anything you'd like to plug or share with the audience, what do you got going on?
Oh, at the moment, I'm just finishing up a book, right? So I know that sounds important, but it's actually quite tedious work. So I've got a book I want to put out to publish, and when it goes out to publication, I'll actually put it on the website CommunicateforLife.ca, and then people can go and buy it there. But also, that's where I'll promote it as well. So yes, I'm in the process of rewriting a previous book into something that's more powerful. So that's what I'm doing right now. And that makes great. I'm taking advantage of COVID because I'm at home anyway, right? So I might as well work on the computer.
That's excellent. Yeah. And Caroline, I know you've got a lot going on with your business. Is there any advice you'd like to give to professionals in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I've been, in and around careers for over 30 years at this point. And I've put a lot of that knowledge into Dream Career Club. That's probably the best way to really just jump in there and get to know all the resources on there. There's access to a free 40-minute webinar, which is about landing a job you love. And I just think that's a good starting point for folks, because even if they're already in a job, it will just walk you through some of the things that you want to think about when you think about making a living doing work that you love. And so that's a good place to start.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you both.